handle the truth.
Welcome, friends, to the Reality of Health podcast. It's Wednesday. Welcome. If you have listened to any of the episodes I've put out this past year, you'll know that I do not necessarily believe everything that I've been told, because I'm a free thinker, and I hope you are too. As you go through life, you start to see things a little bit differently. You see new information and you have to change how you think. If you don't adapt, you will never overcome. You will be stuck in the old paradigm, and that paradigm may not be very good, both for your health and your well-being in all areas. So today we're going to talk about some things that are going to be very difficult to believe. Yet, my stance is that maybe what we were told all along is what's really hard to believe. I'm going to challenge your understanding of what you've been taught most of your life, describe a little bit, and then also kind of give you a counter argument, or maybe some new data. Then you can decide for yourself. So before discounting an idea or concept, just remember, most everything you've been taught to believe is a theory. I'm just going to give you some really fun, really interesting things to consider in this episode. And I hope you find it as enlightening, and maybe it will help to open up your own beliefs of these specific topics. Okay, that's enough of an opening. Start right off. I'm going to give you a few of them, okay? Here we go. No such thing. Yep, that's the title to this episode. Because there's no such thing as a sodium-potassium pump in the cell membrane. There's no such thing as cell receptors. There's no such thing as an immune system. There's no such thing as synapses in your nerves. There's no such thing as neurotransmitters. They don't promote nerve transmission. There's no such thing as genetics. That's just propaganda and hooey. There's no such thing as DNA as the structure of the living cell. What did you just say, Erik? Yep, I just hit 7 things that may not be true. You can decide for yourself. Then at the end, I'm going to give you 2 more. Okay, let's start with malaria. It's considered one of the crowning achievements and most settled scientific accomplishments of the last 100 years. Everybody knows it's a unicellular parasite called a plasmodium. It's transmitted by mosquitoes, and then they sting you, and then the next person gets stung, and so on and so forth. They say there's 5 stages in its life cycle, and that's why they do mosquito netting. And then they're going to roll out a vaccine to handle the whole thing. None of that is actually true. In fact, when you go back to the 1880s, when this was first being proposed to the people at the time, the doctors, the microbiologists, the toxicologists, and the malaria people said there are parasites infecting your red blood cells. In actuality, this is what red blood cells look like when they're deteriorating. The scientists before the 1880s all knew this. They could see it. There's no evidence of a parasite, not one ever. They've never seen any of the 5 stages of this one becomes this one and then becomes this one and it proliferates. They've never pulled out a parasite, isolated a parasite, and then shown that it caused disease in any human or animal. And even you have these crazy things like Haiti and the Dominican Republic. They're on the same island. Haiti has a huge amount of malaria. But guess what? The Dominican Republic has essentially 0. So what is it? The mosquitoes can't fly from one place to another? Well, that's the border. We can't cross there because we have to stay in Haiti. Come on. I mean, you keep going into these things and you realize that none of the explanations essentially in conventional medicine and conventional biology are actually founded in truth and logic and something called science. I might get a little worked up in this episode because I find this stuff really fun to talk about, but also we've been told a lie most of our lives. And people made money from it, and they don't care to tell you the truth. For example, in synapses in your nervous system, here's how they tried to prove that it existed. Ready? They took a nerve, pulled it out, dried it, cut it up, and of course the ends, they fold in, they curl in. Then they say there's a gap. And then they say you have millions of these things in your body, and that's how nerve transmission happens across these gaps. Yet the transmission is so fast you can't even time it. That goes against all common sense and logic. It is incredibly ridiculous. So instead of having a direct connection from one point to another, let's break it up into many pieces, then have gaps, and then have one chemical jump across the gap to continue the transmission of the impulse. It's like a connecting subway or a train station. Got to get off, and then onto another, and so on and so on. They still have not observed it happening in the body. All these breaks in your nerves with neurochemicals running across the gap? Really? Before the turn of the century, people didn't believe in the germ theory, or that you were a particle machine making up a human body. So essentially, a whole bunch of molecules put together and you are now you. And that's it. Nothing more to you than just that. No spirit, no soul, nothing. Everything you see, touch, observe, everything around you is just particles. Well, guess what? They've observed all throughout history people being healed with things like light and sound. People could be put into a cathedral, a church cathedral, or a room, then blast sound or just, create a whole bunch of sound, certain frequencies, and they would heal. They believed the energy all around us is what kept us alive and made us heal. Like I spoke about with the Egyptian chambers that were designed for sound. Those chambers were tuned specifically to frequencies to heal specific areas of the body. So people would go into cathedrals or sound rooms and heal a broken bone or whatever else they needed healing from. Pretty cool. Not all scientists believe in the molecular particle theory anyway. Protons, neutrons, and electrons, because it's so small, you can't see them. Therefore, you can't measure them. People who believe in molecules are called atomists. I'm not sure I'm one of those, actually. I can't really say that I believe that atoms exist. Nikola Tesla actually was not an atomist. Another reason why they hated him. Why? He proved the ether. And ether proves electricity is everything, all around you and free. Maybe you and I are much more complex beings. Mind, body, and spirit. They all work together, interact on so many levels to achieve every circumstance from healing to dreaming. Isn't that much more of a beautiful experience to live in than to think that you're just made up of a whole bunch of little pieces? How do you explain your soul and your spirit? How do you explain energies that are good and energies that are bad? How about good and evil? It is fully testable to see energies in all different types. They see energy in the body in all kinds of ways. EKGs, MRIs, CT scans, X-rays, all kinds of stuff. Then you have things like electroculture, which is pretty cool. I love this. These are the kinds of things that excite me of being alive and learning. Have you heard of this? These people will take magnets or energy rods or wires and they'll put them in their gardens or in the ground. And their gardens go bonkers. If energy is not real, then how come your plants grow bigger and better and tastier when you add electricity? Where did you get the electricity from in electroculture? From the earth and everything around that said garden. No one can explain life. So maybe this is a good description of what life really is. Energy. You're made of energy, and your energy is all around you, and God is energy, and He made it, right? Doesn't take away from how you believe in God. How did God create everything? Through energy. He spoke it. What is sound? But energy waves. If you don't believe in God, that's fine. Doesn't change how energies of different types have influence on everything around you. I'm not discounting that there is stuff. All the things you can see and touch, those things are manifestations of Energy. Think of water. The different energy state that it's in creates either solid, liquid, gas, or structured water. Oh yeah, my favorite. So what makes something cold or spicy? What makes something salty? What makes something loud? Why is fire hot? Why are some things that you put in your body super, super powerful and other things you don't even know you put in your body? I could go on and on with questions like this. Truth is, we know more about energy than we do anything else, and basically, we barely know anything at all. Everything's a theory. Why is that? Why don't we know how everything is and works and exists? Maybe we're not supposed to know everything. We are told that DNA transcribes itself into other proteins to make new life. They also say that it's in every single cell of your body, half from your mother, half from your father, and it's the same your entire life. So they tell us that your DNA is 4 feet long, and yet it folds up so small to be in the nucleus of the cell. It is not possible. And no one's ever seen it happen. You can't take DNA out of your nucleus and stretch it out. I know a long time ago in my beginning episodes I talked about this because I still have to say things to everybody that they can relate to. Now that you've listened to me for a while, I can say things like what I'm telling you about right now, and you'll understand that, okay, there's the way I've been taught my whole life, and now there's some other perspectives. I can give you both. Let you decide. So it's not possible to even pull this DNA out and look at it. They say it's hundreds of times larger than the nucleus. So how can you store it in there? But that's what they say. What are you saying, Erik? I am saying, how do you get your garden hose to fit into your coffee mug? You think that's a dumb example? Well, how about this one? How do you fit a rope the length of a Target parking lot into your water bottle? See? You can't. Yet they say that's what's happening. Never been proven. Never even seen it. It's all theory. They also say that one gene makes one protein. Now follow me. They say there's 200,000 proteins in the human body and 20,000 genes. What happened to the other 180,000 proteins that are unaccounted for by the genes? So where's the code for the 180,000 that they say, well, they actually say there isn't one? What? So if the whole point is that genes code for the proteins, that means 80% of them don't have a code. Let that sink in for a second. They just make this stuff up. Next thing they say is DNA is made into mRNA in the nucleus. Now follow me here regarding the inside and outside of the nucleus. Hydrogen atoms cannot pass in and out of the, we'll call it cell membrane of the nucleus. So how does mRNA get out of the cell membrane when it's hundreds and hundreds of times larger than a hydrogen ion? The smallest thing there is, apparently. It's like trying to drive your car out of your garage using the man door instead of the garage door. That protein is way bigger than the hydrogen ion. You can't get it out. Dr. Thomas Cowan says it's like creating a mosquito netting that lets the elephants out but doesn't let the mosquitoes in. You see? It's so stupid. So since they can't prove this, they made up this thing called an endoplasmic reticulum. Remember that from 8th grade? It's a tube that opens up in order to let the mRNA out. Then they say at the end of the endoplasmic reticulum, there is a device that only lets the mRNA out and does not let the hydrogen ions in. Let that one sink in. Have they ever seen it? Nope. Can they prove it's there? Nope. So what does that make it? It makes it a theory. Here's another one. 2 Nobel Prizes have been given for showing that there is a sodium-potassium pump on the cell membrane. So they think it's really important, sodium-potassium, and I do too. We're going to talk about that in an upcoming episode because those 2 elements are super important for your health. It's all about the water, and those 2 run water. Basically, sodium-potassium pump allows not only water in and out of the cell, but helps create pH and nutrient flow and all kinds of other things. But Dr. Gilbert Ling comes around and says, well, let's just strip that there membrane. So he did. Guess what? The sodium and potassium inside the cell remained the same, proving there's no such thing as a sodium-potassium pump or any kind of gateway. Supposedly, the membrane blocks things from coming in and out and has these gateways and pumps that allow for pressure and all kinds of physics and chemistry. Yet, he supposedly pulled off this membrane, which we don't really know what it is. It's kind of there, but it's really not. And yet, the sodium and potassium on the inside and outside the cell were exactly the same. Proving, again, no membrane, no pumps, no sodium potassium pump. Therefore, they gave away 2 Nobel Prizes for something that doesn't exist by a guy who took the membrane off. And nothing happened. I'm serious. You can't make this up. You've been told to believe this your whole life. And then a guy comes around and just goes, hey, let's try it. You think that with 2 Nobel Prizes, they would have pulled that membrane off to see if there really was any pumps? Oh no. See, that would ruin a theory. It is absolutely, definitely shown now that DNA is different in every cell of the body or every tissue, and it changes all the time. They have now proved this beyond a shadow of a doubt. This is real science. Absolutely, this is the way it is. Since it isn't stable, like they say, it is always trying to be in a different, healthy state. Contrary to what they say, which is you are diseased because of your cells dying or mutating. No, the DNA is not the same in every single cell. It's different in every cell because it's constantly needing to change in order to stay healthy. That there can then look like lots of different things like diseases. In the 50s, Watson and Crick, who were prominent in DNA theory, said the double helix for the DNA, they assume, rotates every 10 base pairs. Classic picture of rotating like a ladder structure that even I use on my branding. If you've not seen that, the green and yellow, you see that DNA strand like a ladder. It turns, kind of twisting. Well, guess what? He said they assume it rotates. So assuming is not science. So did you measure it? Of course they didn't measure it, because they can't. And it's been like this ever since. So Erik, why do you use that photo? Again, it's because when you see it, you know what it is, and now you can reference a health channel. Doesn't mean I believe the DNA is real. I don't know if the DNA is real. It could be there, so small that it's just not 4 feet long. It's, 0.000004 feet long. Who knows? Can't get that small. We can't see it. They claim they found DNA by using protein structure from the nucleus, powdered it, aerated it, then added phosphoric acid. Yes, the stuff in Coca-Cola. Instead of using sulfuric acid, which, by the way, would be appropriate for living structures. Then they claimed it was a phosphorus-rich protein structure. Well, it should have been a sulfur-rich, but anyway. Then they exposed this powdered chemical to X-rays for 61 straight hours. Yes, X-rays. Supposedly, remember, this is the fragile chemical of life. So you have acid, dehydration, centrifuging, X-rays for 61 hours, And then they get an image on an X-ray film that looks like an X. Not Twitter, just an X. And that became the evidence that is what you know of as a double helix. If you thought that was a bunch of hooey, about 20 years ago, college grad students performed the exact same experiment, only this time they used a spring from a ballpoint pen. Do you know what the conclusion was? You got it. The exact same photo of an X. So that means your DNA is the same thing as the spiral spring of a ballpoint pen. You see what I'm trying to tell you? There's so much bogus science, information, propaganda that is perpetuated. This is why I tell you all the time you were listening to propaganda and being sold to believe all kinds of things all the time. Science is full of complete nonsense. Most everything you have learned is theory. They don't have proof of most things. Rarely do they do real science. Because real science takes a long time, it's very expensive, and nobody wants to do long, drawn-out, expensive studies or experiments or clinical trials. It's better just to make it up out of thin air, don't spend the money and not prove anything, and just tell everybody this is what to believe. Let's talk ribosomes, because they fall right in with what I just said. Those are said to be the protein factories in the cytoplasm. If you're not familiar with the cytoplasm is, it's the watery area of the cell, and then everything's inside that. It's responsible for translating RNA, and they're floating in the cytoplasm or attached to the endoplasmic reticulum, a completely made-up thing with a made-up name. If you look at them under an electron microscope, they're circular. You've seen photos of them. If not, go online, you can see it. They all look the same, a perfect circle. That would have originated as a sphere when they first took it out of whatever they took it out of and then did all the things to it and then put it into an electron microscope. It started out as something, now it looks like a circle. Well, that came from a sphere. So when you cut a sphere, you look at it, it's a circle. Then they do all that stuff we spoke of earlier. So let's illustrate this point. You take an orange, you slice it in half, and you look at it. The slice is a circle. In order to recreate that, you should be able to do what they do in a lab, which is take that orange, they blend it in a blender, dry it, add chemicals, do all kinds of crazy things like shooting x-rays through it and all kinds of stuff. Then they look at it under an electron microscope. Guess what it looks like? Yep, you guessed it, a total mess. They don't get perfect circles like that. They've been telling you that these ribosomes and their function for the last 70 years, when really they're just gas bubbles. Yeah, provable. They're just gas bubbles. And they're all exactly the same size, by the way, which makes it a gas, because that's what things like gas does. They call them ribosomes, which comes from the word rib. And the function of them is to translate proteins in order to make new ones. Kind of like a copier. You may have heard this someplace else in your life. The Bible created another human being from Adam using a rib. They're just mocking us. So when you look at two-dimensional slides of structures and chemicals and proteins and all kinds of things in an electron microscope, you can't see them in normal light-bearing microscopes, so they have to do so many things to that material to isolate it in order to see it, that by the end, it's completely distorted and contaminated, deconstructed, and geometrically a mess. There is no way to conclude that just because it looks a certain way under that condition, that's what it is. Yeah, that's what they say it is. They have used dyes and acids and poisons and radiation and all sorts of things to try and isolate what something looks like. They have never seen any of these things in real living tissue. Never. It's all this discombobulated mess outside of a living being. Now, there are microscopes like Royal Rife had in the 20s, and it's called the Gaston Naissons microscopes, that can actually see living tissue happening. So why did they change that up and go away from it and do all kinds of crazy things when all they had to do was use this same technology that they had in the 20s? And by the way, we're going to talk about Royal Rife in the future. He was destroyed by the medical profession because he was changing things for the better. So what's the answer then? How do we know what's real with the body? What is a cell anyways? So here's a quote from Dr. Cowan. I'm going to read it. So remember, this is just him speaking. I'm going to try and do my best so you can understand it. He says, if you stick with common sense, reasoning, logic, and reality, we have tissues. There's about 188 of them. 44 of those we know don't have any cells in them. They're known as acellular structures. The others may have cells, although I sort of doubt it. But let's just say they're organized tissue or maybe even compartments called cells. And then you see this dome-shaped circular nucleus with a membrane, and then you have organized or coherent or gel-like water, which has protein infrastructure like scaffolding. And it also has lipids and minerals and other things dissolved in it. And then you have a very thin membrane around the cell like Jell-O has, a kind of skin on it. But there's no real membrane, and then you have these inclusion bodies, which are called mitochondria. And they're like the power source, the power pack. They make ATP. That's at least the chemical carrier, but it's not to do with energy. ATP essentially binds to the proteins and unfolds them, then the water collects on those unfolded proteins and forms a gel. The ATP plays the role that heat plays in making Jell-O. Mix proteins in water, nothing happens. When heated, it unfolds the proteins. The water attaches, then that cools, and it makes gel. So that's what you have. You have this dome with an antenna on it. That DNA might be the antenna, and then it's embedded in a watery pool of crystalline, coherent, structured water. Then it's got a power source, scattered around in there, and that's it. That's a cell. End quote. If you look at the Taj Mahal, it looks exactly like what he just described. A dome over a structure with an antenna coming out of the top, sitting in water. Interesting, isn't that? Almost like they knew what they were doing. Actually brings power from the ether, which would be everything inside the atmosphere, through an antenna at the top, down through the structure into the water for healing. That was on purpose, not as a tomb for a woman. We operate the same way. We bring in power through sunlight and sound and ether and your feelings and your thoughts, which you might argue is the consciousness. So then this energy comes down through all your tissues into the antenna on top of your mitochondria, bringing that energy into that structured water that makes up, let's call it, cells. And that is what powers you and keeps you healthy. If you remember recently, I said that you are a water structure. So follow me here. God said, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. That's key. And God said, let there be light, and there was light. Okay, so now we've got waters and light. What is light? It's energy. And without light, everything dies. Nothing was living before the light came. Follow me? Okay, let's keep going. So what is disease or sickness? Well, easily can be a poisoned piece of food or substance that came into your body. Your body then heats up the water that is disturbed. That can be in your cytoplasm or in other tissues. That's what your fever is. Then you have to get it out. That's your snot or your urine, or feces, or coughing and sneezing, any number of things. Then your body has to reconstitute that water to get better. Another reason why consuming plenty of fluids and good nutrition when you don't feel well gets you better faster. So what creates ill health then? Well, maybe the energy around you. The EMF field is disrupting the water in your body? Could be. Whereas sunlight and good sound and the EMF fields in the forest and the ocean and the mountains and the rivers and all those kind of things actually create good health in your body. It's hard to be upset when you're in those environments, isn't it? But we're all indoors on computers, watching TV and Wi-Fi and tons of electrical pollution all around us. That interrupts the good energy. By the way, the best energy is the sun. Nothing is more powerful for your health than the sun. Now, check this out. Light is different than the sun. What, Erik, are you talking about again? You are so weird. Well, check this out. God lit the world before he created the sun. Again, what did you just say, Erik? How can you have light without the sun? All right, follow me. So clearly light is energy. Have to have energy for life. Then he could create life after that. The sun is different than light. What kind of light was it before the sun? Don't know. That's what you call a noodle cooker. Your brain being the noodle if you've never heard that phrase before. Here's what he said. And the evening and the morning were the third day. So you already had light and waters. Now he's created the days. We're on number 3 here. And God said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be signs and for seasons and for days and years. And let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth. And it was so. And God made 2 great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. Do you see now that things are not always what you were told or what you thought they were? The sun is different than light. By the way, negative emotions are another way to hurt your health. Constantly being in a stress state by hating other people, constantly wishing bad things on people, revenge, hatred, just generally being evil instead of being loving and kind, and then receiving love and kindness from others. And this is provable as well, not only scientifically, but also just every day in your life. You see this. So if you have protein structures in your body that are not functioning very well, the body has to get rid of those proteins. That creates a symptom associated with a disease, either chronic or acute. You feel your immune system actually trying to fix you. The symptoms are not the dis-ease. The symptoms are the body trying to get rid of the dis-ease. So if you stifle those symptoms, you don't get rid of the dis-ease. Then what happens to that dis-ease? It stays there. Either toxic water or toxins or mold or broken down proteins or cancer tumors or any number of things. You don't get them out, they poison the body even more. Masaru Emoto, the Japanese scientist I told you about before in the EMF episode, where he took negative emotions, put into water, and when you freeze it, it makes discombobulated geometric shapes. When you use good thoughts and good words, then freeze it, it makes perfectly beautiful snowflake-like structures. That means those are energies. Those are messages coming in through energy and then manifesting in a form. Do you want the good words and feelings and energies going into the water in your body, or all the negative, evil garbage? You can look them up online. You'll see the photos and videos. The type of energies you put into your body imprint into the water, both in and outside the cell, if the cell actually exists. All those energies are everything from food, beverages, air, water, negativity, positivity, prayer, meditation, exercise. It's all there. It's all just different forms of energy. That's all it is. Everything is just energy. Nikola Tesla said it. Remember, if you want the secrets of the universe, look to energy, vibration, and frequency. All right, if you're still here with me, this one's gonna blow your mind. You ready? No such thing as a virus. Yep, I just told you. They have never isolated even one, not one, ever. It's never happened. They've tried, but they've never been successful. It has been proven so many times that it's just a perpetual lie at this point. Keeps the germ theory alive. They know what they are, and they don't want you to know what they are. Who would lose money if the truth was finally accepted? I think you know who. Bacteria also doesn't cause sickness. Never been proven to harm anybody. They have stuck all kinds of bacteria and so-called viruses into humans and animals, and they've never got anyone or anything sick ever. So the thought that my kid went to school, he got something from somebody, came home, and we all got it. It's still not a virus, and it's still not a bacteria. I'm not 100% positive that it's an EMF field or energy thing. I don't know. At this point, I don't think anybody really knows. But the healthier you are, the less you get sick from other people. But since they cannot make people sick using the germ theory, and this goes all the way back to when they first started this whole nonsense, they still have never made somebody sick from a virus or a bacteria by giving it to another human. They've put it inside their nostrils. They've put it in their lungs. They've put it in the blood. It doesn't make people sick. So then what is it? Why are bacteria there? Because you can see them. Bacteria is there. Viruses are just broken off pieces of proteins. The bacteria are there to eat up the tissue that's poisoned or dead. Think about it like this. If you always see firemen at fires, you would think they always caused it. In reality, they are there to put the fire out. Do they cause a little damage while putting out the fire? Sure. Have to get into the house or move things out of the way or cause some water damage to save the rest of the structure. That's why you also feel bad when you have bacteria present. So you go in for a strep culture and they go, yep, look at strep bacteria sitting here. That means you have streptococcus infection. Wrong. You have something wrong with tissues, and now the strep is there to correct the matter. You see, doesn't that free your mind to think that you should not be afraid of strep or E. coli or any of these other bacteria and viruses like, you know what the latest one big scare was? No such thing. Doesn't exist. They want you in fear of these things. People make money when you're in fear of these things. Don't fear these things. Fear the symptoms, not the theoretical cause. The healthier you are, the less you will feel those symptoms. Now, there are certain things you're going to get sick from that are going to overpower you. There's nothing you can do about it. They are way too powerful to handle. But you, if you are healthier, you don't stay as sick as long, feeling the body trying to regulate and fix itself. If you go back to my early episodes, I talk about this a lot. Symptoms are not the disease. Symptoms are also not the cause. They're just that, symptoms. So this is why you don't have an immune system that you were always taught to believe. That's a whole other episode. I will leave that here for today where we're at, because that gets into weeds big time. So whether you believe me or not, doesn't matter. Did I open up your mind? Do you see things slightly different than you did before? We can go over and over this concept many more times. If you want a deeper episode, let me know. But if this sheds some light on questions you've had, like, why am I afraid of something that no one can see? Or why is it that my whole house gets sick at the same time? Well, we don't know. The reality is, nobody really knows everything about how the body works, what influences our body, other than what we actually can prove at this point of existence. And that is, energies are the most studied things, and they have the biggest impact on us. I hope you found this episode insightful. If you think I'm full of crap, let me know. If you think it was thought-provoking, let me know. If you think anybody else might want to listen to something so outside the box, maybe, let them know. Thank you for listening. Take care of yourselves. If you want to contact me, my info is in the description box. Feel free to ask a question or suggest a topic, maybe some feedback, whatever. I look at every email and every comment, but please be constructive. I will not tolerate spam or rudeness or lewd comments. This is a place for healing and knowledge, not a negative space. If you want to read the transcript, it will be located on my website for each episode. It is therealityofhealth.com.